meeting of the 20th of July. Do I have your, for that, councillors? Say aye. Does anybody have any apologies from the floor? Anybody? No? Any apologies?
Just one, Chair, from Councillor Nelson.
Any declarations of interest from anybody? Thank you. We're going to move on now to the Q2 update on the taxi licensing of the team manager. Thank you. Just bear with me. Thank you.
Is that working now? Yeah. Just mindful that the camera is going to be wrong on the screen. Is it going to help if I sit there, perhaps? Is that one working? Can you find me? There we go. Lovely. Got to make sure I'm on camera. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Greg Pickardite, the licensing manager at Wolverhampton Council. We've been you very kindly entrusted responsibility for taxi licensing to us last April. This is just one of the quarterly reports back to you. We're currently working on a web page to try and reduce the amount of freedom of information requests that the council gets about the number of licenses. We obviously report back to this committee quite regularly. The information isn't particularly, well, it's not sensitive at all. It is basically public information. And rather than us having to keep respond to those requests, we're going to get an automatic report which goes on our website, which just reads directly, and it can show you how many license holders there are of each type. So that information will just be permanently available rather than people have to keep requesting it. So again, another thing that we're trying to do to save money. We've also just sent out the award notice for our new driver license badges. Quite excited about those. I think I've mentioned them previously, that these contactless badges that people who get taxis in South Staffordshire will be able to their phone out, and then they can tap them, one in the vehicle and one around the driver's neck, and it will be able to check using the internet to make sure that that person is licensed and that it is a current and real license. I don't believe there's any authority in the country that's doing that, so it will be new technology, which is great, and again, it's for public safety. If you look at the statistics, there's an unusual amount of vehicle surrenders. Just to reassure you, that's nothing untoward. There was a company who likes to buy nice new vehicles and then sell them after a certain period of time. And then when they were selling those vehicles on one of the operators, they were selling them to somebody who didn't have a license to drive those vehicles as private hire. So they surrendered the licenses so that they could sell those vehicles to, ordinary member of the public. There is a regulatory subcommittee that will be held soon to determine the application of a driver who is not clear of the council's guidelines. So that will be arranged shortly. And again, just another update that unfortunately we are still waiting the publication of the Department for Transport's best practice guidance. consultation closed in June last year. In March, we were advised that we would be having the information imminently. We are still waiting for that. Once that comes out, I want to make sure that Wolverhampton and South Staffordshire will be compliant with that as quickly as possible. I previously brought a consultation to the committee, and the committee have approved me to consult on any changes necessary. I don't know what's going to be in the final guidance. It may be that it's drastically changed since the original draft, which might be why there's been a while since it's going to be published. But we're expecting that imminently, and hopefully I'll have something to update you on that in future. Other than that, just to advise that we're auditing the private hire vehicle operators bases. So we've got through most of those now, and should be able to, by the end of the year, audited every operator in the district, which is great. Yesterday, following our trade group meeting that we have with the trade, and also very kindly attended by the police, the police expressed a desire to understand more about taxi licensing. So yesterday we went to Codsall Police Station and our officers explained some of the regulations. A common thing that causes some confusion is about drivers not needing to wear seatbelts if they are carrying fare-paying passengers. Sometimes, we've had issues with that in the past. So it's about kind of, clarifying the legislation that's applicable to taxis, our license conditions that we have, and also how we can just work together and help each other. So that went very well yesterday. And I'd also just like to mention that the commercial regulation manager at Wolverhampton, Chris Howell, his last day at the council was yesterday. Chris was obviously the architect of getting the delegation over to Wolverhampton, so he played a huge role in that transition. So anything now for future that would have gone to Chris, please feel free to contact me about. Thank you, Chair. That's everything I've got. Happy to answer any questions on the taxis. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Any questions for Greg? Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you again. Could you just tell me, how long is it taking for a license to be agreed? The reason I'm asking, I had a complaint this week from a taxi driver, actually, who drives for the county, and he was saying how long it's taken to get it agreed by Wolverhampton. Is that just a one-off, or do you try and do it quickly? Get it on, and then we can't turn it off.
Is that okay? There we go. Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair. So we have a dedicated officer who deals with the South Staff's applications, so they should be being picked up the same day. Wouldn't expect to be taking any more than a few days, as in less than a week. If there is a problem, and I'll come and find out exactly who the individual was, it's often because we're waiting on other information. So the common problem that we have, and we've been trying to lobby the Disclosure and Barring Service. We've also been lobbying government, the Department for Transport, is the issues around the DBS certificates. Sometimes they can take a while to get back, and obviously we need to have that information available. It's a particular problem with the update service. So this was rather than them having to keep buying a new certificate every 3 years, the DBS introduced the update service where you could pay an annual fee, and then it would go online, and then you wouldn't have to keep buying these certificates. The real problem that we're having with that, which is we find very frustrating, is that the payment mechanism is not a direct debit. And if it was a direct debit, it would be very helpful for the drivers, and it would be very helpful for us, because the payment would just be taken automatically. It's actually what's called a recurring card payment. And that means that if you get a new bank card in the year, which, your bank card lasts 5 years, so every year 20% of our license holders are getting a new bank card. If they forget to log on to the website and then update their card details, which is a bit fiddly, unfortunately their DBS certificate expires, and then they have to start the process again from scratch. So they end up actually having to pay more money than we originally thought that they would. It's something that we are speaking on every level to try and get changed. It's a very simple solution. If direct debits were in place, it would save the drivers time and money. It would save us money. It would save the DBS from repeating those checks again. So it's something that we are trying to change. I'm not saying that applies specifically to yours, but that's just an example. But we're always trying to get the number of working days down, and ideally it's a same day service. But I will come to you shortly and find out who the individual was. Thank you.
Is there anybody else got anything? Councillor Adams?
Thank you, Greg. In the press, there's been a number of reports about the number of private hire licenses that have been issued by Wolverhampton in relation to other larger bodies. I'm not sure how this really works and whether we're getting drivers that are actually applying to have private hire licenses and they are not Wolverhampton drivers. They in fact could be well from Manchester. Have you got a comment? Have you got some sort of statistics or sort of comment or the rationale for this happening?
So thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So it is quite a complicated thing to be try and summarise quite quickly. The good news is this doesn't really affect our Staffordshire Council in the same way. It's Wolverhampton that they're applying to. We can't refuse to grant a licence to somebody just based on where they live in the country. So you can't refuse to grant a licence to someone just because they live in Birmingham. Now, that's because of historic reasons, the way that the legislation was introduced. It's from the most recent legislation, or large legislation, is from 1976, predates even mobile telephones. That can cause some issues when people are trying to make bookings or run an operator centre using mobile telephones. In summary, we can't refuse those people who apply from elsewhere. If they're fit and proper to hold a licence, then we must grant the licence. And the reason that they're applying to Wolverhampton is because 7 years ago, we spent six-figure sums on introducing this incredible technology, updating. We used to have paper application forms. Our processes were such a way where people would have to come to the office 3 or 4 times and do a little bit more and whatnot. And we changed it so that we had an online application form, and we were one of the first councils to do that in the country. And whereas historically it had always been more convenient to just go to your local town hall and just apply for your private hire license there, this new online form means that it's much more convenient for a lot of people if they just want to apply at home, that they can do that rather than physically going somewhere. We get people, it's online. We get people apply every day of the year. We get people apply on Christmas Day. Would you believe it? But it's far more convenient, and that's the primary reason that people are coming to Wolverhampton. Because we've got so many people who apply to Wolverhampton and that we give the licenses to, and licensing is ring fenced, so we can't use any of the license fees for anywhere else in the council that's not related to the work that we're doing. That means that with the increase in the number of people who are applying to Wolverhampton, we're getting economies of scale, and we're getting far more income from it. So we have to return that income to the trade by reducing the fees. So we can't just save it or anything like that. If the surplus gets too much and we're having an underspend, we reduce the fees to the trade. That obviously means that things are cheaper, and then that's the next biggest thing that's attracting people, is that our license fees are cheaper for people. It's causing obviously some issues for Wolverhampton. You've mentioned the publicity, but the point is that for South Staffs, and this is why we wanted to work together, is that it's very beneficial to South Staffordshire because they get the convenience of these online applications. They get these lower fees, and we've got to remember that where there are reduced license fees, that benefits all of the people who use taxis and private hire vehicles in the area. So this is these savings are passed on to the customers. If we put license, not that we can't just put license fees up without justifying the spend, but where license fees are cost more, the people who hold those licenses, all they have to do is to pass that. They have to get the money back from customers, so it just puts prices up for customers. So overall, we're very proud of what we do at Wolverhampton. We're pragmatic regulators. We always try and, as I say, we're working with government guidelines and not having requirements which are overly onerous. For example, requiring taxis to be blue, which can cause a problem because then the vehicle owners have got to go and get their vehicle repainted or go and buy a specific vehicle. It can then devalue people who own blue cars. People don't want to buy those ones secondhand because they're like, well, I don't want that car. It looks like a taxi. The government, the best practice guidance is advising against those kind of requirements, and yet there are some authorities that are saying no, we want to have those regulations in there. Our opinion is that's unnecessary regulation. It causes lots of problems and it costs money unnecessarily to the trade. So we're very proud of what we do, but we understand that our methods sometimes conflict with other areas, which causes tension.
Bernard? Sorry to interrupt you, Bernard. Could you do it on the microphone so you're recorded, please?
Sorry. Yeah, as I say, most of the people here, they weren't even on the council when it was agreed that Wolverhampton take over licensing from South Staffordshire. I mean, I've learned something from you whereby you say the fees are reduced. Didn't know that before. So obviously, I think we need some refresh so that we know actually what's going on totally as a committee. What I'm really interested in is what kind of profit then does Wolverhampton make? How many licenses in total does Wolverhampton look after? I mean, you've told us something about how South Staffordshire benefits, which is the people who apply for licenses. In your opinion, how does this council benefit from Wolverhampton taking on the licenses?
Thank you, Councillor. So just to reiterate, and this is a problem, and this is one of the issues that we have with media coverage of this. To be absolutely clear, there's no profit whatsoever. We're public service. You're not allowed to make profit on taxi licensing, so there is no money that can kind of be used for other things. That the funding is ring fenced. And wherever you generate a surplus, so in 1 year, if we don't spend as much money as we take in, when we're setting the fees, we have to calculate them in such a way to mitigate that. We did that earlier this year. This isn't obviously applying to South Staffs as a whole. Now, this is talking about Wolverhampton a lot now, but earlier this year, we returned over £1 million surplus to the trade by reducing those license fees. I don't have the figures for South Staffs on what your license fees were previously off the top of my head. But when we were originally having the meetings, and again, I think some of this information is the specific numbers and the agreement is confidential, but if committee members want access to it. There were some non-public papers that were agreed several years ago. You obviously all entitled access to that. But the point is that the reason that we were approached is because the license fee for South Staffordshire was going to have to increase quite significantly, and that's why we were working together to try and reduce that. And this is all, this is all about working together, having those efficiencies rather than everybody trying to do things differently. If we work together, we can do things more easily and cheaply. So that's kind of it is a bit of a positive thing in what we're trying to do. We wanted to work with our neighbours and build those relationships and demonstrate that we can support other councils and how we can do that. In terms of licences, so obviously we've got the figures here. So South Staffordshire Council, we've got about 208 private hire driver licences. Now the total number that Wolverhampton has for private hire drivers is 37,000. So it's quite. You can see where the economies of scale come into that. Rather than having a team just focusing on those 208 licences, we've got that as part of our wider service. We can deliver that function much more efficiently. One of the other things as well is the amount of compliance work that can be done. We are able to inspect the private hire vehicle operators, the companies more frequently. So as I say, we're trying to get do an annual audit of those. I think I'm correct in saying that wasn't previously being done when it was at South Staffordshire. That's because we've got more resource to be able to do that. And again, the compliance operations, the monthly compliance operations that we have, you can see in the reports. Every month we're out across the whole region with a visible presence, pulling vehicles over with the police. Latest thing we've been doing, which I think I reported in the last meeting, was checking tyre tread depth. We've fantastic that because we've got this money, we can afford these devices that measure tread depth using a laser. Very important for us, tread depth, because that affects your braking distance, and it's much safer for that. So those are kind of a bit of a flavour of the benefits of our size is helping to offer for South Staffordshire as well.
Councillor Allen.
Sorry, I can't find another one that's working. Just two brief questions really about the enforcement action, please. I noticed the private vehicle hire operator is under enforcement action on the list, and it's 10 vehicles. Could you explain what's happened with that, or an example of two of those, please?
So I think that they were the license surrenders, so that they're not actually. So we've not actually had to. So sorry, just to clarify. So a surrender is when somebody gives up a license. So I think that one was that they wanted to stop working, and with the vehicles, they were the ones that were sold. So if you have to have a license to own a private hire vehicle or be the proprietor of it. But for anybody to drive that vehicle, you have to have the driver license as well. Sometimes this can, this is why we're very keen to stress this, because previously, if somebody's got their own personal vehicle and then they go and get it licensed, whereas their partner was previously allowed to drive it, if their partner wants to drive that vehicle, they've then also got to get a driver license. What this means is that if any of the taxi companies are selling their vehicles, they've got to surrender the license if they're not selling it to another private hire or taxi driver, because that person who buys it legally won't be allowed to drive it. They'll break the law if they, buy it and then drive off. So that was the reasons for the surrenders. For the suspensions, as far as I know, they were relating to road traffic collisions as well. That was what that was for. But and I'd like to reiterate this, is that On the whole, South Staffordshire's trade is excellent. We don't have tend to have major problems, and we still do the compliance operations, but generally they're all compliant, so we don't tend to have a problem, and that goes for the operators as well. When we've been doing the base audits, none of them have failed that we've been auditing so far. So it's all running very well as it should do.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor?
Can I just point out that to get to this stage, it took several years and lots of work. So it has been ongoing in the council, and councillors have been aware of what's, because it's had to go before various committees and it's had to be viewed. I think Wolverhampton have been known as an exemplar authority, haven't you, for doing the taxi licensing? And from our point of view, I think our private hire drivers, they benefited because of the fees, and I think the population of South Staffordshire as well, because there are more robust safeguarding options. So it's been quite successful, I think, for South Staffordshire, but it has taken. How long has it taken to get to this stage? I mean, this is reviewing it as it is now, but to get to the stage when the transfer actually happened, that was at least 2 years. So it's not just something new. It's been ongoing, and councillors have been made aware of the processes and lots of other information that we've had meetings, we've had all sorts of things. So it's not just something new. It has been made, the councillors have been made aware of it, and I think it has been an advantage to South Staffordshire because it's taken some of the onus off our officers, and the private hire drivers and the residents have been offered a better, more robust service. So I think from that point of view, it has been successful, but it's not just been a fly-by-night. It's been a number of years to get to this stage, and there's been a lot of work, a lot of legalities, a lot of rewriting contracts and whatever. So to get to this stage has taken a long time, and I would commend the people who've actually done this, because it has been a really, well, it's been an onerous task at first, but now it seems to be working quite well.
Thank you very much. Anything back from you?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I could just come back on that. Thank you very much for your kind words. And yeah, I would like to, and perhaps we can, well, we'll have to do something more on this, because it was a 3-year agreement that we had between ourselves. It was approved by full council, I think in December 2021. So we're obviously going to have to review this arrangement and agreement, and it's my job to make sure that you are seeing the benefit of this, and we do all think that it's a good thing to do, because from what I've seen so far, I think it would be a good thing to renew that and extend the agreement that we have. Just another thing, just to the benefits to South Staffordshire is we were the first council in the country to introduce daily DBS checks of those people on the update service, which is the scheme that I was mentioning earlier. And the reason that we've been able to do that is because we could afford the 5-figure sum that it was to develop this computer system which checks those criminal records automatically. So there are many councils in the country. The government requires criminal records to be checked every 6 months. There are many councils in the country who have to pay admin staff to go onto every record and check whether that's up to date on the website. It's an incredibly laborious process, and that's one of the reasons that their fees are higher than ours. We've got a computer system that does it automatically, and it pings their computer servers every single day, and we get a report back to say, yeah, that their criminal record is still good. There's no new information on there. As far as I know, we're the only authority in the country that does that every day. And South Staff gets to benefit from that, because you get the exact same service for your licence holders as well.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the contactless badges. Will you be doing like outreach to residents around that new initiative?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's a big part of this is going to be about communication and engagement and making sure that people are aware of this new facility and they will be able to check. So that is something that we've got planned to do once we've got the contract in place and the badges finalised. And we want to roll this out quickly as well. So one of the things that we've required is, because some of the licenses have been issued for 3 years, so ordinarily those drivers wouldn't be getting a new badge for 3 years. But that's not good enough for us. You know, we want to roll this out as quickly as we can. So we will be replacing every driver's badge with these the new ones as well. So the old badges will become void, and then we'll make it a clearly distinctively different design, so you'll be able to tell at a glance if they've got an old one or a new one. But yeah, we will be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to reinforce what Rita's been saying, because having been chair of the licensing committee when this was agreed, we have spent many hours on it, but I think let's build on what it's saving South Staffordshire. It's not about the money that we're getting from Wolverhampton. It's about the money that we don't have to pay out for staff and for people to check the vehicles, all of the things that we didn't have the manpower for and would have cost us much more money had we have continued in the way we were. So I think, and also for South Staffordshire residents and wherever they go, it's safer because the drivers are checked much more than they used to be. That, as as we've just been saying, their licenses are checked, all kinds of things are checked. So I think the advantages to South Staffordshire are great, really, because we haven't had to provide the staffing and the checks and everything else that would have gone. That there were more and more each time, and I think we've actually given the problems over to Wolverhampton, really. And as we were saying, we didn't benefit from the money really because it was just ploughed back in. So it wasn't as though it was sitting in a pot for anything, potholes in the road or anything like that. It was nothing to do with that. So I think we have to build on the positives as opposed to any negatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. John? You've been patient.
Actually, Megan has said pretty much what I was going to say, but just for the benefit of the new members, it did actually came about. We had a licensing meeting and we were alarmed at the fact that so many South Staffs drivers operators were going to Wolverhampton, and we assumed wrongly that it was less regulation, less whatever. And we were up in arms, and we sent Dave Patterson and the licensing to meet with Wolverhampton because it affected us particularly. And they just came back and said the opposite. They are streets ahead of us. They're doing it better and cheaper and more efficiently. And we've got to say we benefit, and we have. It's been a success so far, but we've got to keep monitoring it and whatever. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you. And finally, Gary, so thank you for being patient.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just clarify what you said about the contactless cards? Somebody could actually scan them. Was that correct?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. So when I say contactless, it's the same technology as what you would have in your contactless bank card, but there's no financial link or anything like that. I don't want people to worry that there's anything like that. What I mean is that there's a radio chip, an RFID chip in there, and that when you bring your mobile phone, I'm sorry, I should also clarify, is that this is only going to work on smartphones that have NFC activated. So if people are used to using their smartphones to pay for things, then that's what's going to interact with it. And then hoping is that it's going to open a web browser on your phone, and it will just say, Greg Bickerdike, license holder, license expires at whatever day, and license to drive, and probably a green colour in there as well, just to provide that reassurance that they've got a legitimate private hire driver in front of them.
Back on that, please, Chair. Yeah, what I was trying to actually get at was, you mentioned that you'd be able to do that when you get into the cab, but it will also be available somewhere else in the car. So let's say that a single female has called a cab and it's a male driver and they want to get in the back, but they feel uneasy about going up to the driver's tab. Is it somewhere else in the car that they can also use as well? Thank you.
Yeah, so at the moment, I think it's on the front, in the front passenger seat. It's on the windscreen there. We can review that and see how that's going to work. But potentially, I don't know if it will be able to go through the glass, but potentially it could be done from the outside of the vehicle. I think we'll have to test that. But all of the license holders are under clear instructions that, you know, it's part of their professional duty, and that if somebody asks to see their identification, legally you have to be wearing your driver's badge at all times during working, and it's not an unreasonable request from a passenger to ask to see that ID badge. And again, as part of this rollout, we will be encouraging drivers to kind of to offer that and make people aware that people are going to want to scan these driver badges before getting in the vehicle.
Thank you for that. Councillors, if there's nothing else for Greg, anybody? Meg?
Sorry, I'm not taking over. Can I just say there is one disadvantage some drivers tell me with going to Wolverhampton. They don't meet with our lovely staff here who they used to come into and talk to and always found a warm welcome. So that's, you know, that's a disadvantage if anything. But other than that, they're quite happy.
Thank you, Meg. That's a nice comment. John?
While you're here, Greg, what was the outcome of the South Staffs operator that operates the executive limousines? And we used to have a clause whereby, because it was the executive, he didn't have to comply with having the logo on the outside, and he was given, when you took over, he was given temporary until his license ceased, and then it was going to be reconsidered. I think it has run out. What was the outcome of that?
So I think that one's ongoing, and we're just waiting for a decision from South Staffs officers about exactly how we're going to proceed on that. But generally, people were given grandfather rights previously, but until the vehicle was due to expire. But I know that they are looking into that, and I don't think a decision has been made on that one yet. But I'll speak to the South Staffs officers to sort that one out.
He runs and has for a long time run a very good business, and there was a reason behind it. People don't want to go and have a hire a luxury car if it's got taxi written all right, and then it would affect his business. And for what it's worth, I would recommend we carry it on.
Thank you, Councillor. That's noted.
Yeah, thank you. Anything else for?
What's the Wolverhampton's policy for executive hire vehicles and having logos on them?
So generally, well, the policy's on our website, and I can circulate a copy if that helps. But generally, the legislation says that the plate should be on display. There are some certain exemptions. Our exemption is only for people who own an operator license, and the vehicle has to be of an executive nature of a certain standard. So it's top of the range models that we have. So I'll give you an example of a problem that we have is that there are people who have Mercedes-Benz E-classes. Now our policy says that the S-class is the top of the range model. If somebody's got an S-class, that would qualify for what if one of the operators has an S-class, that could qualify for the exemption policy. The E-class wouldn't. And I do think that that's, without going into specifics, I think there is, with the issue that's been raised, a question about what the standard is of the where you set that bar for the executive vehicle policy, which is why there's not been a clear decision on it yet. Previously, an exemption from the executive policy was granted, but it's about whether or not that is renewed.
Is there anything else from the floor? Greg, I'd just like to thank you on behalf of us for the comprehensive answers and answering all the questions. Thank you. I'd just like to hand over to Jasmine now for the food report. Thank you. You can jump on there.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jasmine Thomas, the Assistant Team Manager for Food and Health and Safety team and within Environmental Health. If I do just a quick overview of what the food service plan is and why we have to do that, that might be helpful to some of the new members here today. So the Food Standards Agency is the national authority responsible for food safety and hygiene across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It's got a legal obligation to monitor the delivery of food controls by local authorities, and it's really to ensure that food is safe from a hygiene element, and it is what it says it is. So from a food standards element, which is generally enforced by trading standards with some overlap with environmental health. So the Food Standards Agency have a framework agreement which for local authorities, which provides guidance on what a service plan should look like and what it should include. So we have to follow what the guidance is and then produce the food safety plan in accordance with that. What that does is allow the Food Standards Agency to assess the delivery of our food plan and also enable comparisons with other local authorities. So partly as a benchmarking against other local authorities. The framework agreement requires that the food service plan is approved to ensure sort of transparency and accountability. So in South Staffordshire now, the food service plan is formally approved by the Licensing and Rate Committee. If I just point you to page 7 of the food service plan. Point 3, that just sort of identifies the scope of the food safety service. So the food and safety team at South Staffordshire inspects all food inspections of all types of food businesses, and that could include caterers, takeaways, manufacturers, warehouses, care homes, schools, events. It's quite an extensive list of businesses that we inspect. We also do infection control work related to food and waterborne illnesses, and we work in collaboration with the UK HSA Security Agency. We do complaint work, allergen work, which we work with in collaboration with trading standards. We do food sampling, etc. And the team also does health and safety work, in accident investigation, event safety, licensing enforcement and animal welfare licensing. So in 2020, local authority environmental health, predominantly food and health and safety services were diverted to COVID enforcement work for the duration of the pandemic. And this had an impact on the National Food Inspection Programme. So the FSA introduced a specific COVID-19 recovery plan up till March this year. And that was to enable local authorities to get back on track with their inspection program, and particularly some of the higher risk premises that couldn't be inspected when COVID was present. The good news is that by March this year, the financial year, the team completed all the work that was required within the recovery plan, and we are now working in line with the code of practice that that local authorities are required to follow. So this resulted in all the backlog of what are classed as category A, B, C premises being inspected, and all non-broadly compliant category D premises inspected as well. So this means that the majority which were awaiting inspection had been completed. But I refer you to page 9, 3.3. So just what do I mean by category A, B, C, D? Point 3.3 just shows a category A is classed as a very high risk business and would normally have an inspection of every 6 months. Category B would be a high risk as well, but has a inspection frequency of 12 months. C is 18 months, D is 2 years. And we have very low risk category E premises. On page 23, just a review of the performance of the team. And I'll just pick some of the things if that's okay. Last year we did over 400 interventions. These include inspections, sampling, surveillance checks, etc. So it's a wide variety of official controls that we have to undertake. That was quite a substantial number, and the team worked extremely hard on that. We did have 2 contractors who also assisted with the backlog of work last year. Sampling numbers were slightly reduced due to the laboratories starting to get back on track post-COVID. And we use a food and water lab that's based in London. So we have a courier system that takes the samples to London on a timely basis. This year we have a monthly program of sampling. The FSA are insistent that local authorities undertake more regular sampling of their food businesses. We had 1 business which was subject to a closure notice and prohibited from training due to an extensive mouse infestation. It reopened and was agreed to reopen when all the necessary work was undertaken. I must admit it was probably one of the worst mouse infestations seen in a food business. We've also this year, just to let you know that there is a prosecution file being produced at the moment, which legal will and senior managers will determine whether to take that forward. Over 250 food-related service requests and complaints were received, and over 170 infectious disease notifications and complaints. We concluded 1 prosecution this year for a business that repeatedly failed to comply with food and health and safety matters. And after undertaking approximately 10 visits to the business during the course of the investigation last year, it eventually was in court and received a fine of £8,000. And the food business operator, the courts prohibited him from having any involvement with any other food business in future. So it was in court in April and June, and having to chase the food business operator, the change of business use occurred in late July. And after further follow-ups, the premises license changed ultimately in October. So it took a considerable time to do that, and there was reluctance on part of the food business operator to engage with the council. at the bottom of the page, you'll see what's called a broadly compliant figure. That was 96% at the end of April for all the food businesses that we have in the area. And if I just refer you to page 24, 1.3, so on the following page, just shows how many business are broken down into the different ratings. So premises which are rated 3, 4 or 5 are deemed broadly compliant, which the vast majority of premises are. Majority are 4 and 5 rated, which is very good for South Staffordshire. The 0, 1 and 2 rated premises are below the standard expected, and according to the National Food Hygiene Rating Scheme, which is highlighted on page 11, if anybody wanted to have a look at that. Some businesses are outside the scope of the rating scheme, so manufacturers who don't have a direct retail element with the public are not part of that rating scheme. Any ratings of any inspections that we carry out or any other local authority carry out can be viewed on the Food Standard Agency website under Food Hygiene Ratings, and you can view any business that you wish to see. Finally, I just wanted to highlight that the Food Standards Agency are looking to make changes to the delivery model for food hygiene in the coming years. Potentially that may happen in the within the next 2 years. It was originally timetabled for 2024-25 year. Phase 1 of the consultations has already been undertaken. So they are looking also at an alternative reporting mechanism that local authorities have to report to the Food Standards Agency in order to submit the information that we do. Around COVID, that changed to a quarterly basis. So every quarter we would have to report back to the Food Standards Agency where we were with our work programme. This now is on a half-yearly basis, but they are looking to introduce some more robust system that might be a continuous reporting element with key performance indicators for local authorities. We don't know when this will come into place, but consultation is due in the near future. And finally, if I can ask members to formally consider the approval of the food safety plan for this year, and if you have any comments to make, please. Thank you.
Does any councillor have anything to say? Councillor?
Just thank the environmental health officers and their department, because the range of their work is incredible, and I really don't think that everyone appreciates it. I know when I give a report at the end of full camps, I always try to emphasise that, because their role is many and varied, and what they had to undertake during COVID was more pressure, but you overcame that, and you've got a really good percentage of businesses that have been rated. Just one question. In the past, there used to be a regular update of ratings for premises, for food premises. Is that something that would continue, or is it too onerous to do on a monthly basis, or would a monthly basis be more appropriate? Because I think people do like to know if where they're going to has got a good enough rating.
We try and put all the 5 rated premises onto Facebook. There has been a little bit of a mixed a problem with that recently, so we're trying to address that. So at least we're promoting our 5 rated premises. It can be quite difficult because with Facebook and the social media, there are quite a few posts being put out by different services, and we have to timetable when we can do those. So we're looking at a different regime of whether we do that on a monthly basis and put it all together rather than on an individual business basis.
that would be fine because it just gives people a guide, doesn't it? And also, I think it reassures people that we are actually checking on the businesses that they're using. And I think it probably gives confidence to the businesses as well to know that they've been rated and they've been inspected. That can only help. That can only help them as well. So I think that would be a good idea, Jasmine. Thank you.
I think it's probably worthwhile adding that we're probably one of the very few authorities that do that. And certainly we're probably one of the first authorities to publicise the 5 rated premises on Facebook, because it is a public domain issue, and just to highlight. And what we find is that some businesses really appreciate that. So from our point of view, working with businesses is good, and anything that helps the businesses to work with us and help to self-comply is even better.
Councillor Allen.
The change in working practice that's been proposed, what are the main difficulties that you might foresee in that? And is it going to require, if it requires more frequent updating to records that are currently being done, is that a staffing issue for the authority? That's one question. Second question is about working with other organisations. I think I noticed schools and other care homes are in those lists. That's 3.15. I think from my point of view, those kind of things are already flagged by those organisations. I'm starting to wonder if a dedicated web page somewhere on our website might be useful to some people who are concerned about food hygiene in certain areas.
So what the Food Standards Agency are looking at, one of the changes they're proposing to make is that the current way of working hasn't changed probably for 30 years. So some businesses that are inspected may be inspected far too much. If they're compliant year on year, then it's you know, we've got to be realistic. Is it the right way of doing the inspections? Do they need to be inspected as often as they are? And should they be given the kudos to not be inspected on that basis, but also we know of businesses that year on year are very good, and does it warrant the resource to be spent in that area? Whereas the resource is necessary possibly in newer businesses, or businesses that are, even though we've got very few non-compliant businesses, as we've identified with our prosecution, it takes up a hell of a lot of resource. So is it better that the resource is then used in a different area for the non-compliant businesses and new businesses, and be able to target our resources where necessary? They're also looking at, but that does have an implication on it. The proposals they were making were quite complex and quite complicated, which also then makes it more difficult to do the work and may have consistency in that work, which is one of the things about the inspection program at the moment, is that nationally consistency is generally very good, and that's fundamental, so that what we do in South Staffordshire and what Telford do or what Wolverhampton do, we're all working from the same basic conditions that are having to be applied to the businesses. So it would be interesting to see how those changes develop over time. And so they're going back and reviewing all those pieces of work again. And the second point was
the other agencies that are concerned and how that information is disseminated, and whether it's an idea to put a dedicated page on the website so people can actually check about their food ratings on all the agencies that are concerning them. I'm hearing this from care homes and from 1 or 2 schools.
Any business is able to go onto the Food Standards Agency website to view their rating. The Food Standards website is our signposting area for any business to look at any information. So we will advise businesses on a one-to-one if we need to, because sometimes it's specifically geared towards a business in terms of how they're operating and what their needs are. So we will do that. But generally, we will have information on our website that's generic to all businesses. It wouldn't make any difference whether it's a care home or a school or any other catering business, because the standards are the same. The requirements for compliance are the same. And generally with schools, they tend to have consultancies or companies who do the catering for them or manage the catering for them. So the onus is on the business themselves to make sure that they are fully compliant or fully aware of what the knowledge is for food hygiene. If there's any query from anyone, they can contact us and we will be more than happy to provide that advice as well, because that's our second aim, purpose, is to provide that assistance to businesses.
Can I also say my thanks, because I was quite astonished at the number of businesses that are turning over every year. And I don't think I'd realised the sheer volume of those. And can I just ask how you're notified about new businesses?
So we get approximately 100, 120 businesses either changing hands. So Mr. Smith will leave and Mr. Jones will take over, or we'll have a totally new business operating. The onus is on the business operators to notify us. So that's a legal requirement on them to notify us. And good businesses will always notify us. The other way we tend to find out about a business is when we're doing inspections or when we're going past a business, we'll notice that something's not quite the same, or we'll do an inspection and we always clarify who the business owners are. And if there's any change with that, that's how we find out. But we will look at Facebook, businesses appearing on Facebook, in the press, any signs that exist that it's a new business. So there are a whole means by which we do surveillance of the district as well. It's keeping an eye out for anything that changes. Also through licensing. So if there's a premises license holder that's changed, we'll also get notified by John within the licensing team as well.
Anything else from the floor?
Sorry, I'm working from my notes. Food banks. As you know, there is a large number of food banks, most of whom are distributing packaged goods, shall we say. A question arose a little while ago about whether food banks will be able to distribute fresh food and how that will be regarded by the Environmental Health Services.
So there's the chilled and frozen food, I presume you're referring to, or even fresh fruit and veg. Yeah, fresh fruit and veg are fairly easy, straightforward. There's less of a requirement for labelling on those products. Chilled food and frozen food, which have a use by date, are the and a best before date for frozen food, have to adhere to the requirements of food safety requirements generally, as they are for any other business. So with the chilled food, they're given a short shelf life. So any food banks would need to take into consideration those requirements as well. And with frozen food, the important bit there is that the frozen chill cycle is maintained so that they don't defrost, and there's not that defrosting and refreezing of food. So it's the temperature control that's really necessary. There is guidance for food banks as well. I know last time that was raised and we did provide some guidance on that. And a couple of the food banks that have considered what some of the new things that they wanted to do, we have been in touch with them as well. But if anybody out there, whether it's a community service of any sort, wishes to set up as a food bank or they're considering what they want to do, I would suggest that if they contact us, we'll be able to advise them and go through what they need to do. But there is some updated advice on the Food Standards Agency website as well for food banks.
Thank you, Penny. Just moving on now then, I'd like to ask for a proposer, a seconder for the food plan, please. Could I have a proposer? Yeah, I so propose. Penny Allen. Thank you. Just before you go, Jasmine, I'd like to thank you, because I've just been told that she's leaving and she's such a wonderful servant to us and retiring. I think that the whole of Staffordshire will, South Staffordshire will hold you in high regard forever. I'd like to put that on record for the committee, if that's fine. Go ahead, Councillor.
I've been out on the job, so to speak, if you didn't mind me saying it, with the lady, and I must say, it was a credit to South Staffordshire.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind comments, everybody. Thank you.
Right, back to business. I'm just going to move on to 6. I'll hand you over to the legal side of it.
Thank you, Chair. So the final item on the agenda, which is the report from the Corporate Director of Governance in relation to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act report, the RIPA Act as it's sometimes known. So the draft policy appears at page 57 of members' pack, or I believe 59 if you're on the version electronically. So members will be aware that as a public authority, we are subject to the controls that are set out in the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, which is known as RIPA. So this is when we do covert surveillance in order to investigate crimes, and oversight of compliance with that sits with this committee. You'll see in the report there that RIPA has been used once in the last year and so far once so far this year. Use of covert surveillance should be resort, and historically it's been used for fly tipping and the detection and prosecution of those sorts of crimes. However, some good news. Following communication with the Investigatory Commissioner's Office, it's been determined that a RIPA authorisation is no longer needed to use CCTV in order to spot fly tippers. So this is hopefully going to help speed up the process and avoid the delays that the teams recently experienced in getting it through the local magistrates court. By way of reassurance, a human rights assessment will still be done, but this will sit as an internal process with the corporate director to give that protection. The policy that's attached is considered on an annual basis, and the control with that sits with the Corporate Director of Governance, and that has been updated. The only changes from last year being to update job titles for the authorising officers, and also to take into account the new approach to fly tipping. Members have any questions? I'll be happy to take them. It's not a question, it's a comment. It has been an absolute boon to know that we don't have to keep applying to the magistrates court, because that delay has caused problems where we've had fly tipping hotspots, shall we say, because the backlog in court, it's made it difficult. So this is really going to help. And I think coupled with that and the new increase in the fines for the fixed penalty notices, and we've got a zero tolerance, that can only be good for the district. Try and clamp down on these fly tippers and little outs. But I say this is a real step forward. It's been so frustrating when you know you've got problems, but you can't actually put the cameras where they're needed because we haven't been able to get to court. So this is a real step forward in the right direction, I feel.
Thank you, councillor. Any other questions? Penny Allen?
Just briefly, I note that the regulations at the tip have changed recently, and some of the things that were being tipped on fly tipping, like plasterboard, are now accepted at the tip. And while we're publicising the fact that we can now do this and actually put more cameras out or put less or put them in certain locations without permissions, could we also publicise the new list from the County Council about items accepted at the tip? Because I think a lot of fly tipping is occurring because they were not accepted in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'll take that back to the relevant team.
Is there any more questions from the floor? Just moving on then, I need a proposer and a seconder for this. I say propose. Thank you. Thank you, councillors, for your attendance, and it's been a fully enjoyment listening to you and your comments. I thank you all very much. So I'll see you all very soon. Thank you. Thank you, Jasmine.